Is this on? Hello. Hi, everybody. Welcome back from the break. So my name is Leanna Hernandez. I am a postdoc here at UCLA in the Semel Institute for Neuroscience and Human Behavior. I'm excited to engage in this discussion today. So we have Dr. Catherine Hartley, who is an associate professor of psychology and neuroscience at New York University. She's the co-director of the NYU Institute for the Study of Decision Making and the co-director for the NYU Max Planck Center for Language and Music and Emotion. And we also have Dr. Kenneth Ginsburg, who's the founding director of the Center for Parent and Teen Communication and a professor of pediatrics specializing in adolescent medicine at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. And he also serves as the director of the health services at Covenant House in Pennsylvania. So the topic for discussion today is failure good for exploration and learning? So Dr. Hartley, from your experience and research, can you tell me how this plays into your work?
Sure. So much of my work is focused on how normal developmental changes in the brain from childhood to adulthood relate to changes in learning, memory, and decision making. And a really important focus of my research is on how trial and error learning, how learning from experience proceeds across this period. And as we all know, and we've heard a lot about this today, a really important component of that is, learning from the successes is equally important as learning from the failures. So failure is an important source of feedback that we have as we engage in behaviors that gives us information that's important for a sort of optimization process, for learning how to do something differently. So we can use our failures to know, that strategy was not effective. I should try something different. And in this way, failure is really a key driver of exploration. You try something and it doesn't work, it's an indication that you need to try something somewhat differently. So it's really a critical part of a process of adaptation. Something we heard about a lot today in the previous discussions, which I think is really important, is that failure can be so adolescence is a period where there is really profound kind of identity development going on. And failure is a part of this process of discovering what one's aptitudes and competencies are. The idea earlier of finding the spark, recognizing where there's not a spark is equally important. When someone tries something and they have an experience of I didn't like this, or we heard earlier the idea of recognizing well, I didn't understand this. Knowing that these subjective metacognitive experiences of did I like this? Do I get this? That these are important signals that a person should trust as an indication of, maybe I need to raise my hand and ask the teacher to explain something differently. Maybe I need to try a different activity if I'm trying an activity and I'm not finding it enjoyable. These are these are the signals that can drive the adoption of different strategies that are more effective, the exploration of new activities where someone may actually have the opportunity to sort of find that spark. Another thing that I've focused on in my past research, which I think failure is really an important part of. So I think parents, part of parenting from an early, we've heard about this idea that, you want to provide a sort of a firewall so that no one ventures into the domain of unsafe behavior. But this is a fine line, being protective and preventing an adolescent from doing something unsafe, and being overprotective. We've all heard of the term of helicopter parenting and well-intentioned parents trying to sort of prevent their children from coming into contact with failure effectively. But this is really problematic because part of the challenge of adolescence is developing autonomy and mastery and competence. And in order to do that, you have to allow the adolescent to sort of take control of their behavior, to try out new behaviors. My 12-year-old who we've just allowed to take the bus home the other day got on the wrong bus. And, this was a learning experience. The process of ending up veering into a neighborhood where he didn't know where he was scary. These are failures. Part of the effectiveness of learning from failure is that it's grounded in the emotional experience, and as we've heard, the dialed up emotional experience that adolescents have when they experience negative events. These are learning signals, that scary experience, and then learning, what can I do? I can take out my phone, I can see where I am on a map, I can recognize that the bus is going away from my house, and I get off it at the next stop and walk home, which is what he did. So that's like a mastery. It's an example of failure driving learning, and I think we have to let, we have to recognize as parents, as educators, that this process is an important part of adolescents developing a sense of agency, of competence, a sense that I can cope effectively in with the challenges that life throws at me.
Thank you so much. So it sounds like Dr. Hartley is saying that failure is very important for adaptive learning, and so I'm wondering, how you think about failure in your own work and how you communicate the importance of failure to the families and the kids that you work with.
Yeah, thank you. First off, I agree with everything that Kate said emphatically, and I'm so glad he made it home. I think let's take it up a level and let's reject the word failure, right? We began talking about that in some of the other conversations. The word failure implies that it is something that you are. And we have to have young people understand that failure is something you experience to grow, that it's an opportunity, that it might be a misstep, but if nothing else, that it is a place to learn. And I think that the way it's framed right now is that people hear the word failure and kids experience, I am a failure. And the role of the adults in their lives is to say, no, you experienced a failure. You grew from it. You learned. And that was wonderful, right? So in my own work, I wear several hats, but for the Center for Parent and Teen Communication, we are trying to engage parents to optimize their relationships with their kids. And one of the things we have to think about if we're approaching parents is how do we address this issue? So what do parents want? Parents want to protect their child. That's one goal. And parents want their child to be successful. That's another goal. So let's look at each of these. So we can protect our child through helicoptering, but if we do that, we're going to miss the major opportunity we actually have to protect our child, which is to prepare our child for the real world. And preparation is protection. And to engage parents who are a little bit scared about that, we can remind them that, in fact, you want your child to make their mistakes, their missteps, while they're under your watchful eye, and you can still guide them and correct them in a loving, not condemning manner, right? So when you tell parents that, they can take a deep breath and say, I would rather them make the mistake now, right? Another little acronym, I saw FAIL being described as the first attempt in learning, if you haven't seen that, which is just a sweet little poster you can put up in your offices. So help parents understand why this learning allows the child to grow, that this is an amazing opportunity. And what is your job as a parent? You should absolutely set very strict boundaries beyond which your child cannot stray, and those are the safety issues. So you have that role. What else should you do? You should model appropriate behavior for your child, so you will continually be their guide. And if it's within safe behaviors and you've modeled for them, then you get out of the way to make their mistakes. But now let's move to the other point that parents want. Parents want a child to be successful. Success is not the absence of failure, as we've heard over and over again. Success is about being the kind of adult who can make a difference in the world, who can contribute, who is a good person, who cares for and about other people. So what is this inclusive of? This is inclusive of having collaborative skills, responding to constructive criticism, perhaps the two forces most important in the workplace. It's not getting your SATs. It's not getting home on time. The things that are going to make the biggest difference in whether or not you're going to succeed as an adult, whether or not you're going to get that second job, is do you take constructive feedback, and are you collaborative? These are the kind of things you can only learn through trial and error, and having missteps, and then learning that the person who cares about you the most loves you in your entirety, even though you've misstepped. So I'm making the assumption that he came home and you still loved him. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to say, I told you 15 times the B-57, but I let it go.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So it sounds like we just heard about some actions that parents can take to really support some of this type of learning. And I'm wondering, from your perspective and from your research, what do you think are the critical factors that are needed to ensure that failure, becomes something that's optimal for learning?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it got drawn beautifully on the summary of the last conversation, but this idea that there's a zone that is a sort of optimal zone for adolescents or any other individual to be in for learning. This requires going outside of your comfort zone, exploring things that are unfamiliar, venturing into a domain where things may be more uncertain. And why? If you only continue to do the things that you're good at, you forego the opportunity to discover the things that you haven't tried yet that you might be great at. What we want is to encourage adolescents to be exposed to situations where they are trying something new and encountering novel and uncertain situations. The outer edge of that circle, the danger zone, I mean, this is the point Ken made about having hard boundaries that ensure their safety. But we want adolescents to begin to stay in this zone of optimal sort of learning progress, the opportunity to discover new aptitudes. So how do you do that? I mean, you have to create situations where that present the opportunity to engage in new activities, that challenge adolescents to do things that are somewhat scary to them, that they may not believe are necessarily their strong skills already, and to present them with the opportunity to try something, to discover whether or not it's something they like and they're good at, to maybe fail at that, and then and to continue to move on. We don't want, and I think, this feeling we have as parents that we want our children to succeed. Sometimes this can be a handicap, because if you want your children to do the thing that they already perform well in, it may be it can curtail this important process of exploration. So, challenging, presenting new activities, preventing. There's a notion that of exploration. It's a process of search. In the domain of computer science, there's an idea that with a search process, when you're trying to find the best solution to a problem, let's say, you can get stuck in what's called a local minimum, which means it's a good solution, but it's not the best solution, or a local maximum, if you will. And the idea is that you want to continue to push someone to be able to discover the real peak of that landscape of opportunity, of skills, of aptitudes. And to do that, you have to encourage them. This feels good, you like doing this, still I want you to do something different. Still I want you to try a different after-school activity. Maybe even though you like your circle of friends you've had for a few years, you should sit with it's going to be okay that you're in a new classroom, where you don't have many friends. These kinds of ways in which we can structure environments for adolescents that continue to that direct them toward these opportunities and challenges, I think are important. Yeah.
I couldn't overemphasize the importance of reframing this in the language of success instead of failure. Of course, we use the word failure, but we can borrow from industry, innovation. Where is new knowledge? Is it at the edges of existing knowledge, right? Where are solutions to social problems? It's where the current adults have learned to avert their eyes, right? We rely on kids to come up with the solutions. But if we were going to look at success and we look at the industry and innovative industries, they use something called the failure index. They want to see how many experiments have failed, not because they want the number to be 0, but they want to know it's high enough, because if all of their experiments have succeeded, it means they've never gone to the edges. In medicine, we're moving towards, in some cases, rapid process innovation research. Why? Because the traditional model took years to develop a perfect model to test against other models, which often was wasted years. Now we come up with hypotheses. We do rapid process testing. We allow them to fail quickly so that we can move on and save lives, rather than waste the years. So we can actually borrow this from the innovative world and apply it, I believe, to adolescents. And the one other point that I wanted to make, you've been talking about, Kate, celebrating unevenness, and human beings have spikes. Highly successful people operate on their spike. And when we expect people to be all things to all people, no one is able to prune away those things that are getting in the way of their spikes. And so having a young person really have life experience that teaches them what they're good at, what they like, and what they're not good at allows you to shed it away transparently. I'm the most uneven person on the planet, right? I'm really good at what I do, and if you're a sick kid or a kid with who needs to be figured out, or a kid with biopsychosocial complexity, I'm that. If you ask me to read an EKG, I can't. The same brain that is so intuitive that can tell you what a kid feels can't settle to look at the minute details of an EKG. That took decades to get past that shame, right? And when we allow kids to fail with loving adults around them, we allow to elevate their strengths, their spikes.
So I'm wondering how we get parents and educators to really buy into this idea that the learning sort of occurs at the edges and when you're pushing yourself, and how you go about communicating the importance of that to the families that you work with.
Again, I think it is about the language of success and having people be able to share their hopes and dreams for their child, when to begin helping parents to stop looking at the child that's in front of them. Too many parents look at the 5-year-old in front of them and they say, what does success look like? And the first thing they're going to come up with is happiness. In that case, buy your kid a cookie, right? They look at the 5-year-old in front of them and they ask about their performance, and in which case they're going to over-focus on school, which is only one measure of intelligence, right, or success. But when we begin helping parents understand, you are creating an adult who will contribute to the world. And your goal, respectfully to all of us, is not to raise that child to be independent. That's not our goal. That's a way station on the way to our goal. Our goal is interdependence, stronger families, intergenerational families, communities that work. That's our goal. But the nature of adolescence is that if you shut down the process of growing independence, it will feel like control, and kids will push you away. If you celebrate and elevate growing independence, and you want kids to grow and maximize their intelligence and their experience, they will appreciate you as guides, and they will turn to you for decades to come, which is where most of your relationship lies. How old is your son? 12 and 10. So the thing is that we parent for when the child is in our house, but if we help parents understand that you're actually parenting for the next 60 years, where you will be interdependent with each other, everything begins changing. So it's all about framing. Shout out to frameworks, right? But it's all about framing and to help parents understand that, again, preparation is protection. Your job is to be a guide, and your ultimate goal is to raise a successful adult. When we use that language, they can take the deep breath and watch the little missteps, understanding that that adult is evolving.
Thank you so much. I'm wondering how you all feel that issues of diversity and inclusivity factor into some of these discussions, both in terms of diversity and in terms of, ethnic background, socioeconomic diversity, neurodiversity, and how we can really encourage this type of learning for all children.
Yeah, some of my thoughts on this have been echoed by previous speakers. I guess we know that one thing that was brought up in the risk-taking session is the idea that failure can have differential costs for different individuals. So where that line of safe and unsafe behavior may fall may be different for different individuals. There may be differential consequences of missteps, and that may have to do with the structural systems that an action may bring a child into contact with. That may have to do with the safety net that their family is able to provide for them or unable to provide for them. So there can be differential costs to failure in different domains, and that means that what is a safe or an unsafe behavior? What is a failure that that an adolescent can't afford to encounter may be different. And this may vary systematically as a function of socioeconomic status, as a function of the color of one's skin, as, many dimensions of diversity. Another thought I had about this is there may be systemic factors that make the probability of failure in a given context systematically different. So I talked about the idea that failure may, if you fail in a given endeavor, that may drive you to explore other endeavors. What we don't want is for children who grow up in low SES households to encounter a higher probability of failure in their STEM classes. If this is the case, it means they will learn this is something that I'm not good at and reorient to something different. And we see this systemically in our education system being learned and affirmed as children move through the educational system. So this, where our societies have set up different probabilities of failure for individuals, and this can be because the quality of the instruction that certain individuals receive at a given stage of their education is different. It may also be because we have cultural stereotype threats about you're likely to be good at this or you're likely to not be good at this. And what this means is that when certain individuals experience failure, they say, oh yeah, that's what I thought. That's that. Of course, that's not something I'm good at. I don't see anyone that looks like me being good at these things. That's right. I'll look somewhere else. So these kinds of cultural systems that really modulate the probability of success before an adolescent even a child even tries something. These are the things that we have to try and rectify, because they're not the they are undermining the ability for failure to function as an adaptive learning experience. Yeah.
Can I comment on that as well? So I'd like to talk about the kids who have endured hardships and who have needed to work within our systems. And by that, I mean juvenile justice system, foster care system, the systems that work with kids who have endured homelessness. There is no room for failure in these systems. These kids are condemned, castigated, denigrated, and set aside. I had a meeting on Wednesday with, because we're being filmed, I'm not going to say it, but it was one of the leading agencies that I'm working with to reframe or reimagine the foster care system. And when we were talking about actually failure, she said, the president of the organization said, there is no room for failure. If you fail, you get sent to another home. You get rejected. So what does that mean? If you have no room for failure, then you can't possibly grow and you can't possibly develop. What else does it mean? It means that for those kids who have endured hardships, who have seen system after system deny them to have the ability of failure, what would you do if you were traumatized? And one of the definitions of trauma to begin with is losing a sense of control. How do you regain control when a system says you can't fail? You fail first so you can maintain the control, and you pretend you don't care. And these kids are not telling us the truth. When they are pretending they don't care, it's because the system has told them that they don't matter. And when you learn that every new home you get into is an opportunity to be rejected, because as soon as you get acted out, your caseworker is going to be called and you're going to send to a new home. What are you going to do? You're going to test that home quickly, and you're going to fail quickly so you can control your own destiny. We can do much better. Furthermore, you're going to have one more minute? One more minute. These labels, these racist, undermining, horrendous psychiatric labels that are given to children when they act out because they've had hard lives, follow them in every system that serves them. And if you are highly reactive, depending on who sees you, you will receive a different label. You might be called depressed. You might be called trauma exposed, anxious, ADD, oppositional defiant, intermittent explosive, conduct disordered. The label you receive changes the way you see yourself, and it changes the way systems interact with you. And if you receive a label of oppositional defiant or conduct disorder, which I have humbly demonstrated is racially biased, and if you receive that label, then what does the system do? The system controls you. The system separates you from the nurturing people in your environment. You're taken out of the schools, out of the after-school programs, and put into juvenile justice and the systems that separate you. What else do these systems do? They control you because you're inherently troublesome. And if you're inherently troublesome and you are controlled, then you can't fail, you can't experiment, you can't grow, and your potential is stifled. So we in the youth development world should fight against these labels.
Okay, well, thank you so much, both of you, for sharing your expertise on what is a very important topic, and really appreciate your time. I think we're going to turn it over to the tables now. So thank you.